I was raised as a Christian. My parents had been for the majority of their life and raised me to be as such. Through the years we tried various churches, from cash grab megachurches to Pentecostal speak-in-tongues churches and everything in between. We settled on one for many years about an hour away from our house, and as I listened to each passing sermon I grew less and less immersed in the faith. I decided to tell my parents I didn't want to go to church anymore. I'd become skeptical and considered myself at least agnostic. I have always felt a spiritual connection, though. That will never fade for me, I think, and the experiences I've had, when it comes to spirituality and the paranormal, have permanently left their mark on my life for better or worse. I come from a long line of Celtic shaman blood, and I think that may be at least part of the reason for my particular penchant for the paranormal. You name it, there's a good chance I've interacted with it on some level, though I can't say I've ever encountered a demon or an angel. That part has always bugged me. I was coming to the conclusion that I was agnostic, that there had to be some rhyme or reason that the paranormal would exist. I've searched long and hard, far and wide, through faux and pseudo-magical texts all for nothing. I've studied each main book of faith and have done research on myths and legends. I could never reach any conclusion that made sense. If it wasn't God and I hadn't had any experiences with things derived from any of the main religions, cults, or anything I'd found thus far, then what was the reason? I attempted a few rituals from the phony magical texts and even from ancient myths and legend, but nothing ever produced results. I couldn't really travel outside the country to get in contact with monks, cultists and other religious leaders, so I turned to the only option I could think of that might produce anything of merit. I turned to the deep web. I'm not the best when it comes to software and such, and could only ever scratch the surface with the various deep web browsers available. Luckily I had an old childhood friend who was good with that type of thing, a black hat hacker turned white. He had a few reservations at first, but in the end he set up a customized VPN server for me, made sure I was as untraceable as possible, warned me of what links to click and what not, and sent me on my way through a back entrance into the deep web. At first it was a lot of sifting through the muck. Links that took you back to the surface web for more phony magic sites and chi harnessing shenanigans, stuff I'd already seen before and had failed me. After a sleepless night, filled with caffeine and particularly vexed by this fixation as I'd become, I stumbled across a link that seemed to jump out at me. Deep web links almost never make any sense, but this one had a structure to it, one that I couldn't quite make out. It was as though the letters were constantly changing, a mix of Latin and English, but not composing any words that made sense in either language. I was about to scroll away from it, but the page seemed to lock up, the exit marker had grayed out, my keyboard wouldn't even work. The only reason I knew it hadn't crashed was the cursor hovering over the link was the clicker icon, instead of the normal pointer icon. I braced myself for some sort of zip bomb or virus to be automatically downloaded to my PC and cause the nuclear meltdown of my poor desktop, and clicked the link. Instead, what I was greeted with was a black screen, and typed out in bold, red letters that slowly changed to make sense, the site had only one word. Awaken? Hovering over the letters, they changed to an almost golden hue, now displaying awaken. After a moment of hesitation, desperation won out. I clicked awaken. The screen turned completely black, and my desktop fans began to whir for a moment. I feared I had in fact hit a fissure link that would break my poor desktop, but after just a moment the fans died down, and my desktop made the noise it makes when it shuts down. I received no warning or on-screen notification for this, when normally it would signify some way that it was shutting down. I panicked, ripping the Ethernet cord out of the socket and the power supply cable out of the wall, unsure of what to do in this kind of scenario. The screen stayed black, and after a moment of self-admonishment, a command prompt opened on screen. The caret blinked for a few moments on the prompt, before a word appeared. The word was awaken. And beside it was a YN prompt. My hands began to shake, my efforts seemingly having paid off, as this was definitely not normal. I was almost giddy with excitement at having conjured something to me for once instead of encountering it unaware. I steeled myself and pressed the Y key on my keyboard, and heard a faint popping noise, as though somewhere far off in the distance, followed by a strange squelching noise. The command prompt disappeared from my screen, which confused me at first. After a few moments my screen was barraged by lines of text I couldn't comprehend, my eyes failing to keep up with the constantly scrolling lines of text as they only lasted on screen for fractions of a second each. I could feel my retinas strain and burn against the contrasting colors and blinding speed. After far longer than I'd have liked, But far sooner than expected, it all stopped, but I could feel something forming in my mind, a thought not my own, and growing rapidly, with a feeling not unlike a cancer. It formed into commands, instructions on what to do next. The feeling deep within my psyche compelled me to follow the order, but I couldn't handle everything all at once, and along with the sleepless night I think I blacked out. I just remember waking up, unsure of how long it had been since I had fallen unconscious, but I knew it was the dead of night as the window into my room only displayed the pale light of the moon creeping in, a stark contrast to the vivid incandescence of the sun I had felt what seemed like just moments before. My head pulsed with an angry aching feeling, and I recalled the command that had appeared in my mind. It was instructions to a ritual, and a simple one at that. I tore pages from unused journals and the phony magical books I had on hand, stuffing them into a jar and setting them alight until they had been reduced to ashes. As the final ember faded and I was swathed in the moonlit glow once more, I rushed outside to find an eerily still but bright night. No wind blew, no chirping of insects nor calling of nocturnal predators. The stars shone with great intensity, and the moon towered above me as I drew the markings that had been etched into my mind with the ash from the glass jar. I hadn't taken notice in my fervor until I was almost done that I was screaming something. Words. Gibberish to most people, even me, but something deep within forced the words out of me, ramping up in both volume and speed as the runes neared completion. As the preparation had been completed I was out of breath, and I knelt there at the edge of the drawings, panting as an alarm beeped. I checked my watch, the source of the beeping. 3 a.m. The beeps quieted as the world seemed to fall away around me. I witnessed the rotation of the heavens above, stars creating a spectacle of the night, as the moon seemed to crack and fall from the sky. During its descent, I noticed it begin to unfurl, gleaming the purest pale white in the entire cosmos. The swirling lights and gleaming pale white above seemingly caused my own skin to reflect the appearance of the heavens, the pure light dancing around my dull figure. The moon continued to crack and curl around itself, as a vague silhouette began to take form. The moon stopped its free fall shortly above me, and began to spin slowly. I could make out a few gleaming features until it had turned its face towards me. It looked at me with milk-colored eyes, nothing but the red of sparse veins to provide any color. Its visage was complex, the vague outline of features shifting and broiling beneath a thin sheet of albino skin. A pop was heard in the distance, and the crack of bone shifting was heard as the moon reached an arm out towards me, spindly and unnaturally long, as were its fingers that held no nails. I dared not move away nor towards it, as it stretched a finger towards my chest, jabbing me with what should be an index finger, before pinching the air before me. I could feel myself lose grip on reality as I fell, and the impact of my body on the grass, and yet still I stood before the moon, gleaming now as it did, my features no longer dull, shining as the stars above did. I took notice of the field around me, as more shining silhouettes appeared around me, some more faint than others, overwhelming numbers of people that shined as I did, some I even recognized having dealt with them in the past. The moon reached its other hand up, seemingly plucking a star from the spinning night sky, and crushed it in its palm. The faint light visible from within its grip faded to a dull glow, and it forced my body to open its mouth, shoving the faint glow inside. As though far away, I could feel something skitter within my body, but I felt no pain or panic. It reached into my brain and I struggled with the feeling of something invading my mind once again. But it passed after a moment, and my body's left eye began to bleed black. Without a word, the moon pushed me backwards towards my body on the floor and I gasped for air, and howled in pain. I awoke the next morning in the field, struggling against the sun to open my eyes. I stumbled around and noticed my depth perception felt off, so I covered my right eye. I hadn't been dreaming, I couldn't see through my left eye. I walked carefully back to my room, to my bathroom mirror and held both of my eyes open. My left eye looked agitated, and it held no pupil within, a milky white with only sparse veins to provide any color. I blinked a few times at this revelation, grounding myself in the fact that what happened last night was real. Learning to live my life half-blind has been difficult, especially the first night. I noticed that when the pale moon's glow appeared once more I could see spirits walking around in plenty of places, and none of them seemed to ever grow aggressive. The only reaction they had towards me now, unlike all my life, was kindness or apathy. I had finally found the source of paranormality, and even what seems to happen after we die, and it only cost me my left eye, and the rest of my life knowing what awaits.